maybe we can start. There's a lot of things that we can discuss about the different issues that you have been involved with. But I guess maybe just we could start by maybe can you tell us a bit more about the barriers that still exist for deaf people here in Singapore?
Okay, sure. So actually, the main barriers in the deaf community, there are two of them. And the first thing is the access to information and communication, which is related to language, right? Every time, us deaf people meet other people, they would assume that we can't hear or can't speak. For example, right? They would just assume just based on looking at us, right? Just because we are deaf. They always just leave us and just tell us to wait, we'll feel lost and confused because no one's communicating with us. Many people aren't willing to just pull out pen and paper to write or to text just for communication. I mean, yeah, some are, but usually they are very brief, very limited information. One example is, when we go for job interviews, and I tell them I'm deaf, they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, the worker doesn't really like to write or type, even if it's just brief. And I'm like, maybe if we do, it'll just be brief. Then wait, why don't we just accept for who I am, right? I'm a person who's fully capable of working. The next thing is, for example, on the train and public transport, on the MRT, what happens if, the MRT breaks down, there's a disruption, right? There are no visual announcements. So we just stand there, completely, not knowing what's going on, maybe using our phones on the train. And I'm like, wait, I'm like, what happened, where's the information? And I mean, another thing is that's a really huge problem, for many, many years already is banking. So, one of the reasons why, for example, right, if there's a banking problem that we have, if you lose our card, right, the first thing is quickly make a call to the hotline, right? But, us deaf people, we can't make a phone call, right? I mean, and then sometimes I would ask a friend to help me call, and then they would tell them like, oh no, the account holder has to be the one that calls. But I can't, I'm deaf, right? That's not possible. Like, what happens if I'm overseas then, right? Like sometimes they would actually tell us to come down to the bank itself to resolve the issue. And what happens if I'm overseas? Like, do I have to fly to Singapore? Like, I mean, there are many other options, right? Sorry, we have to look for other alternatives. We actually have to apply for leave for work to go to the bank, while they're open. And it's definitely, I think, you can really see that deaf people don't really have an easy life here. I mean, yeah, and then sometimes banks even tell us to send them an email, right? Instead, sometimes it takes 2 to 3 working days, and not all deaf people can write really well. Some are not literate, and they only communicate solely on sign language. And sometimes some deaf people do use interpreters, and even interpreters themselves. In fact, in Singapore, interpreting the interpreters, there are not enough of them in Singapore. Sometimes, even if I request for an interpreter, sometimes the access itself is I can't afford it, or sometimes there are people who just unwilling to provide that access, right? So, that's one of the things that deaf people face, the lack of access to information and communication. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. That's very important for us, our audience to know. And I thought you laid it out very well in terms of the different dynamics of those barriers as well.